We got a boat attached to the truck. So, all right.
Shall we start?
Yes, we shall. All right, everybody. I'm sitting here with Dr. Chris Lehman, whose biography goes from everything to a multiple state championship winner as a rower in high school to a national championship winner at St. Joe's College. Also a special advisor to Reagan and currently the chairman of the Landing Craft Support Museum Foundation. And what is the purpose of the foundation that you are chairman of at the moment?
Well, it's a group that was put together to honor World War II Navy sailors and all veterans of World War II. And there was a group of sailors that were assigned to a new class of ship that was put together for defending American troops going ashore. As you see in the movies and things, the big battleships and destroyers and cruisers are all shooting, trying to soften at Normandy and also in the Pacific. But they have to stop when the troops are going in the small boats for fear of fratricide, hurting your own people. And so at Tarawa in 1942, I think it might have been 43, when the big guns stopped, the Japanese on Tarawa were all underground in caves. And so when that gunfire stopped, they all came up and were ready to shoot and defeat the Marines coming ashore. And the Marines had a very devastating, they were devastated. I think it was probably 40% casualty. And so the Navy decided we need closer in gunfire support to protect the troops as they're landing. And they took an existing ship and completely redesigned it from the deck down. It was the same engine and the same hull, but they upgunned the heck out of it, and it was a shallow water. A larger battleship takes 25 or 30 feet down below the water, so you need to be in deep water for a big ship. This ship had a maximum depth of 6 feet, it was built so it could actually run up on the beach if it had to, and then pull itself off. But it was heavy gunfire support, up close and personal, defending the troops. And it was called Landing Craft Support Large. And there are numerous quotations of how they saved thousands and thousands of Marines and Army going ashore. They weren't available at Normandy in 1944. They were available in late 44 and all of 45 in the Pacific.
How long does a conversion like that take? You said that it was a pre-existing ship.
Well, they redesigned it in a couple of months, and they built 130 of them in about 8 months. And of the 130, 26, I think is the number, were either sunk or damaged beyond repair from counterfire from the Japanese. And also, you've heard of suicide airplanes.
Yeah.
They had 24,000 suicide motorboats.
Oh, wow.
And they used them extensively in the Philippines, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, Borneo, and some other places. And that's one of the 3 of them were sunk in about 2 minutes in February of 1945 in the Philippines, because it was night and the motorboats just came by the dozens. And they tried to shoot them, and they shot a lot of them, but a lot of them made it through and sank these small boats. I mean, they're 160 feet, not small, but compared to a destroyer or a battleship, pretty small. The larger boats used to call them the small boys, but they had a lot of respect because, in particular, these ships were hugely effective in taking on the kamikaze, both the boats and the aircraft. And at Okinawa, they were responsible for more than 85 kamikaze shoot-downs. So they were a historic ship. There's one left in the world. We saved it. It's a floating museum, and that's what the foundation does.
Oh, that's cool. I'm embarrassed to say, despite all my World War II knowledge, I'd never actually known that there were motorboats that performed kamikaze missions.
And if you look up Shin-Yo, S-H-I-N space Y-W-O, you'll learn a lot about suicide skunk boats.
Well, I'm going to look into that. That's I imagine that being only 160 feet in a lot of ways can save them from the kamikaze planes, because if you miss that, you've got to make a whole turnaround. It's not
Well,
like a
first of all, they're
battleship.
smaller, whereas a battleship is a pretty big target.
Yeah, that's got to be a lot easier.
Second of all, when they saw a battleship or destroyer, they wanted to go for the bigger ship, and they had to fly over the smaller ships. But they were also attacked independently. In fact, there's a Medal of Honor recipient who had command of an LCS and was hit with a kamikaze, and he was wounded, but he stayed fighting the ship and helping his crew, many of whom were burned or killed. And his name was Richard McCool, and there is a new U.S. Navy ship named the Richard M. McCool. And I made a promise to that Medal of Honor recipient to save the last ship of the class. There was only one left in the world, and we saved it. And it's afloat out in Mare Island at the former Navy base, which is about 30 miles from San Francisco.
And you're attempting to bring that back around into Philadelphia, am I correct?
You are. There is the Navy's 250th birthday is this October, and there is a very big celebration in Philadelphia called Homecoming 250, and there will be a parade of ships, much like the Army paraded tanks in Washington for their 250th. The Navy is going to have a parade of warships, starting with a replica of a ship that was built when it was the Continental Navy rather than the United States Navy, and that's actually afloat here in Alexandria, Virginia now.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And so that'll be at the front of the parade, and they'll have, I don't know, 6 or 8 or 10 U.S. Navy ships. And they've invited me, if I can get the ship from San Francisco to the East Coast, to make it a big feature of the parade, because it's a very historic ship.
Dude, very cool. I wish you luck on that. I hope you get that done. Now, that will require it to go through the Panama Canal, correct?
Yes, it will. And of the 130 ships that were built, 50 of them were built in South Boston in 44 and 45, and all 50 had to come down the coast, stop on the Chesapeake Bay, and I'll think of the name of it in a minute. They had a base, Solomon's Island,
Okay.
where they did about a month of training on ship operation and driving in and anti-aircraft. And then they went to Key West, refueled, went through the canal and up to San Diego, did more training, and then off they went to the war in the Pacific.
And so you'll
But
be doing
50
the
of
reverse.
them were doing the reverse. It's going to be pretty much the reverse course, down to Panama, through the canal, up to Key West, and up the East Coast and into Chesapeake Bay. It's going to take a couple $1 million, and I'm not sure I can raise it in time to actually do this, but if we do, that's what will happen, and I've got another 2 or 3 months to make it happen. Stopping at Annapolis, and maybe even Solomon's Island, and then through the Delaware Canal, and then up the Delaware River to Philadelphia. It's a long shot, but the ship will come to the east because it's going to be a part of the new Museum of the National Museum of the United States Navy, which is in the process of fundraising so it can be built, hopefully in the next 5 years. And they want that ship to be a permanent exhibit in the new National Museum of the United States Navy. So keeps me busy, keeps me out of trouble.
Well,
And the foundation is raising money now, and if anybody really cares about it, they can go to USSLCS102.org. That's USSLCS102.org.
I agree. Well, I hope they care, because that would be cool to see, and we're going to go and make sure we put that in the notes for anybody who watches this. So
Good.
That'll be a good way.
Oh,
Now-
it's a fun thing. Keeps me out of trouble now that I'm supposed to be retired.
How long you been retired?
Technically since 2020,
Okay. So,
but
fine.
I'm on 3 boards of 3 foundations, and I do a lot of volunteer work, and I got grandkids, and trying to have fun and do good and stay out of trouble.
Plenty to keep you busy. Well, I've got so much I want to ask about regarding, shipbuilding and all that. But first, I want to go back to a little bit of your biography. So I saw that your family goes back to the founding of Philadelphia. Is that correct?
Yes, one of my relatives, Philip Lehman, I think was his name, was William Penn's business manager. They called him secretary in those days, but he was the business manager for William Penn when he was here in America at the start.
Dude, that's super interesting.
And then we had relatives that were privateers before there was a Navy. And then I don't remember all the different members, but my great-great-grandfather was in the Union Navy during the Civil War and was actually blown up in a U.S. Navy ship in the assault on Richmond in the James River here in Virginia.
Did you tell me he was one of a few survivors left on that ship?
There were only 6 left out of about 75 crew. And I think it was historically the first U.S. Navy ship blown up by an underwater mine in the history of the Navy.
So it is pretty obvious that you've got Navy in your blood, in your background, a love of water.
Yeah, my father served in World War II, and 2 of my brothers served in the Navy. I served in the Navy. And I have 2 sons who are Marines. And just so you understand, the Marines are part of the Department of the Navy.
Okay.
So,
how old were you when you got in the Navy?
Let's see, I enlisted in 1969, so I was 20.
Okay. And what was your job? What was your desire when you first got in the Navy?
Well, I wanted to be a fighter pilot, and I was in training, and if it had been a year earlier, they'd have given me a waiver, but my eyes went below minimums, and Vietnam was winding down. So they said, you can't fly. So I wound up staying in the reserves for a while and then getting out and taking a civilian national security career.
Now, the whole finding your eyes were not up to their par, was that something that they were testing for, or was it just kind of you just went and it just was an accident?
Well, it was, let's put it this way, when they run you into the ground and keep you with no sleep, I'm not surprised. And I was pretty close to the line, but I had dropped below and somehow they got it.
Yeah, that's a shame. Different life, though. All the many lives one could live.
Yep.
So then you got into the civilian side of things. So what was your first job after that?
Well, I had to go to graduate school and get degrees in the field of national security, which I did. And then my first job was in summer of 1976. I got hired to work on the Senate Armed Services Committee as a national security and foreign policy person or expert or staff person.
Now, was that hiring as a result of what you wrote your dissertation on? Or did that happen later?
It was my general national security background, but because I focused on more than just that. But I did do my dissertation on nuclear weapons and targeting doctrine during the Nixon years. And there's a copy of it over there. Nobody ever looks at it, except maybe my children once in a while.
Would you say that is still a relevant topic?
Very, very relevant, and it's withstood the test of time in terms of deterrence and defense as an aspect of deterrence and limited nuclear options versus mutual assured destruction, which was a strategy for a while, but not a very wise one. But yeah, it's still relevant. And if you look at it, with Iran and the Chinese and the Russians substantially expanding their nuclear forces, and we've got 30 and 40-year-old missiles. The first new missile was the MX, and that was during the Reagan years. Now, we keep them modern, and we keep them functional, but the Russians and the Chinese are starting to make the nuclear balance come back into question again.
That I find that particularly bothersome because, well, especially on the Russian and Iranian side, they clearly have a propensity towards, handing over weapons to proxies. And
absolutely,
the idea of them giving even one of those to the wrong people.
Well, and Iran has medium-range missiles now that can reach a good part of Europe. And And of course, they've threatened Israel, to obliterate them and drive them into the sea. And, at least with the nuclear balance between the Soviet Union and the United States and Russia and the United States and even China and the United States, you have rational to semi-rational leaders. And rational leaders can be deterred. The trouble is irrational leaders can't necessarily be deterred. And that's why North Korea is such a dangerous issue, and why the radical Islam fundamentalists who think that the end of the world is going to come by fire, and that's what they're hoping for. How do you deter somebody who's not afraid to die?
Yeah, that's a problem. Well, question regarding North Korea, somewhat off topic, but we obviously look at them as a problem. Do you think China also sees them as a problem? Because, China and Russia, I would imagine, despite any friendship they might have with them, there has still got to be a threat because their proximity is just...
I hadn't thought a lot about that, in the sense that because birds of a feather flock together.
Of course.
And they're both radical Marxist communist countries. And I'm sure China has the ability to crunch North Korea just with electricity and financial aid and railroad connections and port connections. So that's in the way low probable category, but I'm sure China keeps an eye on it.
Yeah, I always imagine that Japan and South Korea would be the people first concerned, but I just can't imagine that China doesn't at least, keep an eye on everything that they're doing all the time.
They have the ability to choke them off economically and even energy-wise and politically. So, interesting question, worthy of thought.
Well, we'll come back to that then. Now, when you were with Carter at the time was trying to essentially, what would be the word for this?
I can tell you I wasn't with Carter.
Okay.
I didn't vote for him.
Okay.
And I was deeply concerned when he was elected, and the main reason was he campaigned on cutting defense by 50% at a time where most of the more rational people were saying the Russians are growing at a very rapid rate. And in fact, Carter was so naive that 13 countries fell to Marxism in his 4 years of weakness.
And for the record, he was doing this how many years after the Cuban Missile Crisis?
Well, that was 63, and this was 77 to 80.
Short memory.
Well, he also vetoed an aircraft carrier that the Senate, and I was a part of it, put into the defense authorization bill. He said, we don't need it. Our Navy's just fine. And it wasn't. We had a Navy with ships that couldn't sail and planes that couldn't fly. And he was just naive. And his vice president, the good senator from Wisconsin, I guess it was, he was even worse. He was anti-defense. Carter wasn't anti-defense. He just thought we had an adequate defense. Well, so that was a tough time, but it's 45 plus years ago, and most people alive today never even think about it, and probably couldn't name who Carter's vice president was, Walter Mondale.
Yeah. Okay. Now that you say it, I remember that. I would not have been able to pull that out.
And they don't remember that, we had the 73 gas lines with the Arab embargo, and everything was in an ugly way.
And I would say that our naval presence has probably done more to continue to keep open the gas flow throughout everything from Hormuz to just that general.
The fact is, the United States Navy has worldwide responsibilities to keep the sea lines open, not only for our own interests, but for the interest of the whole world, and particularly economic growth and, as opposed to war and pestilence, prosperity. So.
Yeah, I think people forget that pirates were a real thing. Not that big, well, they're still kind of a thing depending on what parts of Africa you're off the coast of.
Well, pirates were a big thing when Thomas Jefferson was president, and my own son was on a Marine ship, and Somali pirates were their mission, and everybody knows about the captain. What's the name of the movie?
Phillips,
Captain Phillips. But before that, the United States Marine Corps took down a ship, the Magellan Star, and nobody really knows about it. But I mean, it's in the press and it was limited, but nobody thinks about it. So we had pirates. Let's see, he was in 2007 to probably somewhere around, I don't know, 7, 8, 9. And the pirates are they've been squashed a lot, but they will continue to be a problem.
Yeah, well, that brings me to a quote that I heard you say once before that said something along the lines of, you raise armies, but you maintain navies.
Well, that actually comes from the Constitution of the United States, not just some phrase.
All right. Then it came from a good place.
The Constitution requires that armies be raised and navies be maintained. Article 1, Section 8, I think. I'm a little rusty on those numbers.
Hey, that's fair. That's fair.
But yes, and the Founding Fathers were very fearful of standing armies because in Europe, standing armies usually meant a coup.
No.
And so in the Constitution, it was raise an army when you need one, maintain a navy because you need it 24/7, 52 weeks a year, every century in perpetuity.
Yeah, I would think
because the seas are the principal line of communication and economy.
Yeah, even now, I don't think enough people think about the importance of the sea because, this is going to be online. This is all, I'm using the internet right now, but that comes from cables that are run between here and Europe. That comes from cables that go everywhere.
And cables, which, by the way, the Chinese have been digging up.
Yeah.
The cables that are going to Taiwan. And of course, about the pipeline up in the off of Norway, the gas pipeline that was going from Russia to somewhere, I forget, to Germany, that was mysteriously damaged and blown up. So undersea, but I forget the number, but it's probably 96% of all communication is by undersea cable now.
Well, yeah, and we always use the term wireless, but there's nothing wireless about any of this.
Well, there's wireless from here to the cable.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it's like
and the cable goes from here to Europe and here to Asia and here to everywhere.
Well, and in the importance of maintaining navies, if you look back, at least to the 1400s, there's never been the Spanish Armada, the Portuguese, like the people who were the strongest, especially a country like Portugal, which was incredibly small. And yet their navy was formidable. Yes. And then eventually it was the British.
Most people don't think of the Portuguese having a great navy, but they
one
did.
Of the best.
And the Chinese 3,000 years ago had an amazing navy.
Yeah,
and
some of the ships I've
seen. Nothing about that.
And it shows you that, again, at the end of the day, without a navy, you are limited to your land. Because even our ships, they can't take off without an aircraft carrier.
There's a phrase that I can't pull out of my head exactly, but essentially... no major naval power has ever been defeated. People think battles are won on the land, but actually they're won by the sea. And if you look at history over time, from Carthage onward, naval power impacted commerce and impacted by being able to deliver forces. Think of the Vikings.
Yeah. Coming from such a small place, and yet all of their reputation precedes them. They were, I imagine, a terrifying sight.
Yeah.
So this is probably a little bit of a loaded question, but then where do you rank if they're not equal? Air superiority over Navy in the long run, because at the end of the day, you can't land a ship without it.
Well, the point is, we had ships before airplanes were invented. And once they were, if you look at the history of naval power in the early 1900s, when that first naval aviator took off from a ship that had a deck that was built on the front and took off. And of course, World War II, air power defeated naval power, particularly in terms of the Japanese Navy attacking the American fleet in Pearl Harbor, and the American Navy eventually sinking most of the Japanese Navy, mostly by airplanes, defeating their carriers and sinking them. And ship-to-ship battles were, real and a factor, but it was really airplanes from ships that defeated the Japanese Navy.
In some of my research, I saw you say something along the lines of the necessity of a 600 ship Navy. Is that number
Well,
just kind of out of midair,
at
or?
the end of World War II, we had thousands of ships. At the end of Vietnam, I think we had about 1,000 ships, Navy ships. And that, of course, doesn't count Army. The Army has ships, and they're mostly for carrying food and ammunition and supplies and carrying troops places. But the fact is, I deeply believe in the Air Force, the Army, the Navy, and the Marines. And I'm even willing to begrudgingly say the Space Force, because space is kind of the last frontier,
Yeah.
and important in its own right. But we need a strong Navy, and we need a competent Army, and an Army that can get from point A to point B. And the fact is, our Navy used to have not only competent warships, but also sea lift, as in the ability to carry supplies and troops to the other side of the ocean. And that capability has shrunken terribly to the point of danger. And if you Google American Naval Sea Lift, you'll find we got a bunch of 40-year-old ships, and not very many of them to carry supplies across the sea. And the fact is, you can fly emergency stuff by airplane, but you have to ship, I mean, even most of the stuff that goes to Ukraine now, American support, goes by sea.
I didn't know that.
And I'm not very good at statistics, but it's about 90% of what is carried across the ocean is carried across by ships, not by airplanes.
Now, when you mentioned like 600 ships or whatever, do we consider submarines and underwater warfare a similar category, or is that a completely different
They are
thing?
part of our ship numbers. And by the way, Reagan campaigned on rebuilding the Army and the Navy and the missiles and the Air Force, because we needed to. We had Vietnam had wound down. Stuff was getting old. I can tell you, my sons who were Marines were flying in helicopters that were older than they were, much older, sometimes twice their age.
That would seem disheartening if I was in the cockpit.
Well, it's disheartening if you're in it. And I can tell you more than once, one of my sons said I had a choice between taking a helicopter or a truck in Iraq, and I took the truck.
That's interesting.
Because they're old airplanes.
So let me ask this then. Since these are all old, these are things that they just...
Well, we're doing some new stuff. We have F-35s and newer F-15s. But an F-15 I flew in was still in 37 years old before they retired it.
Well, how long
You
would
generally don't drive an American. Of course,
No.
we rebuild them and repair them and keep them up to snuff. But eventually it's old technology.
Now, how long would it take to build? I mean, I know this is a rough estimate, but just one new ship. Like, what does a ship take to build?
Depends on the ship. You can build a destroyer faster than you can build a submarine now, because the submarines are very, very modern and sophisticated with missiles, and not like World War II, where it was torpedoes and a 3-inch gun on the bow, and that was it. But aircraft carriers take 7 to 10 years, and a lot of ships take 3 or 4 years. Really varies on the type of ship. You could do it faster by throwing manpower at it. We built thousands of ships and thousands of airplanes in World War II, but we had every factory working 24/7 because we needed them. And today's airplanes are so much more complicated and sophisticated that it takes a long time to build them.
So manpower is the thing, because one of my favorite facts is that, do you know how long it took to build the Empire State Building?
2.5 years.
No, 1 day under a year.
Yeah.
They built that it was 363, 364, something like that days. And I think about what we were capable of at one time and how quickly we could do things like that. And American manufacturing was just
Well, we
king.
still could do it more quickly. All it takes is money. But first of all, in World War II, everybody saw the threat and everybody leaned in and everybody was taking their pots and pans and taking them in for scrap metal to make ammunition to win the war. It's different now. First of all, we took a year plus to build momentum before we really actually got involved in World War II, because we didn't have very much in terms of capability. But now wars are going to be pretty much come as you are war.
Yeah.
And the guy that runs out of ammunition before the other guy may be the guy that loses.
Well, then that begs the question to me, why do you think that America is not leaning in now the way that we once were?
Because politics. It's simple. It's politics. Politics is the art of the possible. And there have been major calls for rebuilding our defense. And the last time it actually worked was Reagan, where we really did significantly rebuild our military forces. And then we lived off of that fat for 20 or 30 years. And by the time Carter was in, our stuff was getting old. Or Clinton, I meant. Our stuff is getting older and worn out and used up. I mean, airplanes, after a certain amount of hours, you got to put a new engine in.
Yeah.
And I still think we're woefully underprepared, but most people think I'm wrong. And, sometimes you find out the hard way.
When I see how many ships China is producing and putting out there, there's clearly...
China has more warships than we do.
Yeah, that's
and
bothersome.
They don't have to defend the whole sea lanes of the whole world.
Which brings me to intention. When they're doing that, it's not just because they want to keep them at their ports. You don't do much else with the military ship.
If you read anything, you find out China's purpose in life is they want to dominate the world. And they understand that naval power is an essential ingredient. And China also believes that America is on the way down and they're on the way up.
Yeah.
And they're encouraged by that.
I'm sure.
But at the same time, what we did in Iraq last week.
In Iran?
Iran,
Sorry.
I meant. Yeah, thank you.
No, you're good.
I'm getting old. In Iran, taking out their nuclear facilities with very sophisticated, modern, capable forces, without even one airplane being shot down. And Iran had the Russians' most modern air defense systems, but they were taken out significantly by the Israelis, but also by the U.S. Our first president, George Washington, said the best means of preserving the peace is to prepare for war. And you can't be too strong in terms of defending yourself.
Yeah.
But I'm considered an old dinosaur who doesn't really know anything. It's okay. We won the Cold War by being stronger and more clever. And there was a Chinese philosopher, Sun Tzu, that said the best means of generalship is to have to win the war without having to fight.
Yeah.
And we won the Cold War without having to fight. But it was by peace through strength, not peace through weakness.
Yeah.
Or peace through timidity.
Well, I would say that they are doing an unfortunately great job at, I guess, the propaganda war, the war of the minds. Even just the idea.
Of course they are.
Just the fact that you said, that they think, and I'm sure many others think, America's on the decline. If you get that in enough people's heads, then
it becomes true.
That becomes the truth, yes. And they, I'm still dumbfounded that as we speak today, this is July 1st, that TikTok is still in our country, owned by China. I don't even care what country it is. The fact that it's owned by them.
And eroding the minds of our youth, number one. But also number two, they're probably embedded in half the electronics in my house.
Yeah. Is there not, you talked about politics being an issue in a lot of things. Is there just not the desire? Do you think that many people are captured, or that they just don't take it seriously because it's seen as some little dumb app with 6 seconds of dancing on it?
Most people aren't paying attention.
It's interesting in a time when our attention span is the lowest it's been.
It is a very serious threat, for sure. And by the way, one of the bigger threats that I think about is the fact that we keep spending money we don't have and going further and further into debt,
Yeah.
and eventually the whole cart collapses, and people aren't paying enough serious attention. We're spending money that we don't have and borrowing it from other people, and particularly from China. Although China is starting to get out of dollars because they're concerned about the stability of the dollar.
Yeah, well, I believe
So economics is important, but when half of your population doesn't pay any taxes, or a very, very small portion, and half the people are paying and half the people are getting paid, it's a very unhealthy system, but it's the system we live in today.
Well, and how much of it, you said that it's China is worried about the value of the dollar. How much of it would be worry as much as it would compared to it's in their better interest that the dollar does become less?
It is, and that's what BRICS is all about, among other things.
I'm
But
pretty
I'm
sure.
not an economist guy.
No, fair. I know this has gone in a
skewed
different
it
direction.
massively in terms of my professional as well as my personal interest. I care about our nation's national security, and we've done fairly well over time, except, we build up and then we shrink down again, and sometimes it may be too late to wake up and rebuild.
Well, for my future, I hope not. And as we're speaking now, probably before this even released, I believe the BRICS nations are meeting in South Africa or Brazil somewhere in the next couple of weeks.
Somewhere this month, I believe.
Yeah, that is that's definitely a bothersome thing to see. Again, I also worry about the fact that just takes away. I know that unipolarity is an issue, but at the same time, you don't want fraction in economics, but so much. The idea of having a worldwide currency makes more sense to me than having 2, 3, 4, because now you get into these little different clubs where, it doesn't make sense.
Well, worldwide currency, there are lots of currencies out there, but there's one that is the anchor for trading. Not an economist.
Yeah, no, fair.
I'm not going to opine anymore.
No, fair. All right, fair.
That's for other people to think about.
Now, when you were growing up, because you got in the Navy, before that, you used to hear something a lot. I heard it was ship up or ship out. Is that correct?
It's actually shape up or ship out.
Okay.
Someone has misquoted that not too long ago. And my dad's, if you were being a bad teenager, he'd say, you better shape up or you're going to be shipping out, as in me kicking you out. But shipping out meant joining the military significantly.
And your brother joined, and you were both in the government around the same time, correct?
There were actually 3 Lehman brothers in government in the Reagan administration at the same time.
No kidding. That is cool. Did you?
I was special assistant to President Reagan. My brother was Secretary of the Navy, and my other brother was the chief spokesman for the Arms Control and Disarmament Agency, which was a separate agency up until a couple of years ago.
Do you remember the first time you met Reagan?
Very. I'm just trying to decide if that was the first or the second time. But
okay.
I guess the first time I met him, other than seeing him and hearing him, I saw and heard him a lot. I had just joined the White House staff as special assistant for national security affairs, and every morning we had a staff meeting with the national security advisor and his 8 specialists, of which I was one. And I had to brief. I did legislative and legal affairs, so I was sort of instead of having a regional, we had a Latin American expert and a European expert and an Asia expert and an economic expert. But I, in effect, had all of them because anything that was national defense could have been Russia, could have been China, could have been Central America, could have been Asia, and also legislative, all the money. So all the defense budget was mine and all the intelligence budget. So I'm briefing on one of these topics, and the national security advisor says, hey, I want you to brief the president on this. I said, great, when? He said, as soon as this meeting's over. And of course, I look back on it and think, I'm glad I didn't have 2 days, because I would have spent 48 hours worrying about it and getting ready for it. Instead, like I said, it's an army. You got to go with what you got. I had to go with what I had, and it was a wonderful experience, because it was just the National Security Advisor, me, and the President of the United States sitting at the other side of the desk. And I was sitting on this side with the President there and the National Security Advisor there, and there was this beautiful little sign that I can never quote exactly, but you can get a whole lot done when you don't care who gets the credit.
True.
And I watched him get stuff done and let other people claim the credit on lots of issues. But he was quite a leader and quite a decent human being. And in fact, after 5 years of working for him, and 3 of them in the White House and 2 in the State Department, I really needed to be home, because I didn't see my children except maybe on Sunday. There weren't cell phones. There wasn't any FaceTime where you could be away but still talk to your kids and wish them a happy birthday if you missed their birthday dinner. So when I had decided I had to resign, and in fact, my letter of resignation is right up there, and the president's reply, I really didn't want to leave, but I needed to do it. The president said, I'll tell you what, I'll accept your resignation on one condition, and that is that you bring your wife and your family and your children in to meet with me so I can get to know them.
That's cool.
And he did that. And he spent a lot of time, relatively a lot of time, focusing on thanking my wife and thanking my children. So, wonderful human being, great experience to work for him. And I go to my twilight years with great satisfaction at knowing I had the privilege to work for him and support and help win the Cold War. So,
it sounds like a
great experience.
It sounds like he had a lot of humility.
Very humble guy. He also loved to be underestimated by his political opposition. Hollywood dismissed him as, a cowboy and a not very bright guy, and he was ragingly bright, number one, and a good strategist, number two, and a good speaker, number three. And there's a wonderful book called Reagan in His Own Hand, or By His Own Hand, I forget. Prior to him being president, the 4 years before, he had a radio program once a week where he would opine on various issues. And it turns out, and most people today can't even imagine this, he wrote his remarks on a yellow pad, a legal yellow pad, by hand. And Mrs. Reagan found those years after he died. And it was amazing because they made copies of them. But this was a guy, he didn't have a researcher. He did his own research. He wrote his own remarks, wrote his own speeches. And you look at these and you see, when I also, of that era, wrote my term papers and my dissertation by hand and then typed them later. And I'd be scribbling out and redoing the sentence and drawing a line over here with some line in there was almost none of that. His brain spit stuff out in coherent paragraphs that were perfect for a radio program or a television program.
That's fascinating.
And he was brilliant. And the book, I think it's called In His Own Hand or By His Own Hand. Remarkable.
That's definitely something I'm interested in.
Yeah.
I wonder how much of that had to do with the fact that him being an actor, you've got to, you memorize your lines, you get your head together. Like there is a fluidity of thought that's required there to be on screen and, just have it all right there and ready. That'd be a guy I would definitely love to have talked to.
He gave a speech in 1976. I'm trying to think of the title of it. It was pretty much A Time for Decision. That's not the exact quote. won't come to me now because you're asking me.
Yeah, no worries, no worries.
But he was amazing, great leader, and he gets no credit. They declared him to be a Hollywood actor and an idiot, and he wasn't. He was brilliant. He outsmarted the Russians and had a very sound strategy, and then we implemented that strategy. And just a privilege to have been part of it.
Well,
but I'll never forget that first day sitting with no warning.
Yeah. I would say if you're going to be thrown in the deep end sometimes, it's best not to know prior.
Yes.
Yeah, that's...
I had to swim.
I went snowboarding once, hadn't been in 2 years, and the first chairlift I got on, didn't even look at where everything going. Took me to the only options were black diamond, black diamond, black diamond. And I was like, well, guess this is happening now.
You either chicken out or you buck up and go.
There was no other option. I could, and I remember thinking I probably wouldn't have gone here all day had anyone told me like this is where it goes to.
Yeah.
Well, before I wrap all this up, to bring it back to what your trip is going to be, you had some work on or time during the Panama Canal Treaty. Is that correct?
I did.
So speak to me about that, because I would like to know about the importance of the Panama Canal.
I was the Carter negotiated the Panama Canal Treaty out of guilt and feeling like we were oppressing the Panamanians. And the fact is, that was the eighth wonder of the world in terms of the achievement, hugely beneficial to Panama, which was nothing but a jungle and an armpit.
Yeah.
And a mosquito pit on top of that.
Yes.
And the French failed at building a canal, and we succeeded. But it was a geostrategic, vitally important asset. And the United States built it, paid for it with tens of thousands of lives being lost to the mosquitoes and malaria. And but we didn't have enough votes to defeat the treaty, but we did have enough votes, conservatives in the Senate, to make amendments / understandings. And the one thing that we did do, and I'm very glad we did it, is we put a provision that required that no matter what, whether Panama liked it or not, we had the right to defend the Panama Canal under any and all circumstances. And I helped write that and for my senator boss, and that became part of the treaties.
Well, let me ask you this then. Do you think we've done our proper job in defending the Panama Canal, given the state of where it is now? I know defense is
No, in the sense of China being the operator of the canal. But we could go invade it and take it over tomorrow if China made trouble. But of course, imagine how much trouble they could make when they knew we were coming.
Yeah. Where do you rank the Panama Canal as far as strategic importance in American interest, or even just waterway interest in the world?
Waterway interest in the world. It's a key economic asset. It's a strategic asset in terms of moving the American fleet from the Atlantic to the Pacific. It also is strategic in the sense that it shortens the travel time. I don't know the statistics anymore, but by a huge factor.
It's a lot.
Long way to go all the way down past Chile and around and up again. But I think the Straits of Malacca, for one, and the Straits of Hormuz are more important even than the Panama Canal in terms of their strategic significance, because we can find ways around the Panama Canal. But for instance, you can drive from Florida to California on Interstate 10 and have a truckload of stuff get there on the other side of the ocean pretty quick.
Yeah, I've done it in 3 days.
And that's why Eisenhower's interstate highway system was so important, because before that, the only thing you could get anything across the United States in any kind of a significant weight and time was the railroads. And doing the interstates, huge economic growing device, not to mention strategic. And most people don't know it, but a lot of the interstate highways are actually built with a capacity to land B-52 bombers. And most people have no idea. That was like a whole set of airfields in time of war that you could use.
You know, it's funny. So I grew up along the 81 corridor, and that was one of those things that I heard when I was younger that I didn't know if that was kind of just, old wives' tales. Like, is that really true? And then you see, because there was a proportion of
true.
straight to any curve like they had to have.
There are lots of straight places with no obstacles in between the southbound and the northbound lane, or the eastbound and the westbound lane, and the guardrails were low enough that the wings of a B-52 could be over it.
That is so cool. Learning now that that's true, that's really awesome. That was one of those things we were told as kids.
Absolutely true.
Have you been through the Panama Canal on a ship?
I have actually operated the locks of the canal. A privilege when I went down there in 1983. I was able to actually open and close. And it turns out you can do it hydraulically or steam or whatever the power is, but you can also just do it with a big wheel.
Okay.
And I was able to spin the wheel and help open the canal. And
That's
so,
cool.
And I also had the privilege of flying a helicopter over the whole canal. But I have not been on a ship going through the locks, and I've toyed with the idea of taking a cruise sometime soon to do that. But there's nothing better than having an Army helicopter that you're
No, that sounds pretty awesome.
where you can land wherever you want and fly wherever you want. So I had that great privilege.
I'm lucky to say I've been to the Miraflores part of the locks before. And that was, again, you talked about it being the eighth wonder of the world. I was astounded when I saw that. It was just, when I think about the engineering that went into that, the fact that it was, 100 something,
No, the
it's
engineering,
phenomenal.
the physics of it weren't all that hard. What was hard is, earth moving.
Mm-hmm.
And what's amazing is you realize it's the rain hitting the top of the Panama Isthmus and running down both sides that equals the canal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you're
Non-stop
not
water.
using water from the Atlantic or the Pacific. You're using rainwater.
I did not know that.
Oh my God.
I had no clue.
I got to teach you how a canal works.
Please, I just assumed you connected two oceans. I did not know that at all.
Oh.
I'm sure that was in the tour. I promise you. I was just so astounded by the whole
No,
act.
you have to understand it's a ladder up and a ladder down.
Interesting. Okay.
And the water comes from the top.
I have got to go watch some videos now. Did not know that.
Well, after we finish this,
Yeah, well,
I'll show you some stuff.
well, before we end, I would encourage anyone to go there. Also, since we brought up Reagan, I've been to his presidential library in Simi Valley. Really, really cool. Also, the only time in your life you'll get a chance, if you're not in the right circle, to get onto a version of Air Force One. It's really, really neat. He's got
I've actually flown on that airplane.
That's cool. Do you remember what year that was?
1982, I think.
So this is for my own personal interest. How at the time did Air Force One compare to just normal airliners? Was it like that
Had a
noticeably
lot of
different?
communication. A section was made so a president could sleep and rest on a long trip. And but where the staff flew,
Just normal.
pretty normal. Although where your luggage rack was, were actually bunks.
Okay, that's cool.
And actually, my wife and I, the one time we were able to go together on a trip. In general, I wasn't able to take my wife anywhere. I was on a presidential delegation where the wives were included, and my wife was pregnant. And it was nip and tuck whether it was sensible to go. And we were flying to London and then to Spain. And the Air Force always sends a doctor on these kinds of delegations. So they had a pulmonary specialist because Barry Goldwater's wife had emphysema, and he was more senior than I was. He was a senator. And so they sent the pulmonary specialist to a 3-day mini course on childbirth or obstetrics or whatever you want to call it. And so the Air Force people were very nervous and wanted to take good care of her. So they let her sleep in one of the bunks.
That's cool.
And we were at the Reagan Library a couple of years ago and went up and touched the bunk.
Oh, that's really awesome. My
It was
my
fun.
my aunt is actually a midwife, and I'm amazed to hear that a 3-day crash course would be good for anyone. But hey, you can figure this out. Same with when you told me
No,
that they
my
were.
wife did natural childbirth on all three anyway, so
Oh, no. You know what's interesting about that?
she could have done it without anybody.
I'm the only of my siblings that was actually born in a hospital. The others were all
Yeah.
natural, but I was breech, and so we had to do what we had to do.
Yeah.
But it's interesting how the military can get you so quickly ready for anything, because you said that they were only training before they would go with the small ships for a month roughly in Solomon Island area.
Well, they did boot camp, which is the basic training. Then you went to if you were a radioman, you went to a radio school. If you were a gunner, you went to a gun school. If you were a cook, you went to a cook school. If you were a navigator, you went to a navigator school. So you had basic training, which I think was 12 or 14 weeks in those days. Then you went to an A school, which was probably 2 or 3 months. Then you could be assigned to a ship.
Okay. And then would they have you
my
do training?
My father's ship, of all the people on that ship, my father had some limited driving a ship around the East Coast. But the only sailor who had been to sea was one. Everybody was as green as could be. They were trained.
Yeah.
If you were a boat steerer, you drove a boat on the Great Lakes, for a couple of weeks. But when you went to your warship, you might have been on a ship 1/3 the size, or anyway. And you had a bunch of 18, 19, 20-year-olds.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's amazing that the world was saved multiple times by practically teenagers.
By teenagers. Not practically. By today on an aircraft carrier, today, with 5,000 people, the average age is about 24. And that's with a bunch of commanders and captains who are in their 40s or early 50s.
Yeah.
But, the rank structure is the commanding officer of the ship and some sort of senior officers, and then some mid-level officers and some very junior officers, all in charge of a bunch of 20-year-olds and 17-year-olds. Because you can go in the military today if your parents sign at age 17.
Oh, I didn't know that.
You don't know a lot.
Apparently. That's why I'm sitting here with you.
And once you're 18, your parents can't prohibit you from doing it. You can go because you're an adult by law. But the war was won by teenagers and 20-year-olds, led by 24-year-olds and 30-year-olds.
All in charge of some of the most impressive hardware that you've ever seen.
Yeah, my son, the older Marine, he had 55. He went to officer candidate school for 16 weeks. Then the officer basic school, which is more than 6 months. Then communication school. Then some infantry training, and then off to platoon 2 weeks before they deployed to Iraq, and they had 55 Marines and $45 million worth of equipment for which he was responsible at age 24. That's why I tell people who don't know what they want to do, and they want to get a finance degree or something, I say, once you get a college degree, you ought to go in the military and serve one tour, because if you're in private business, you'll be 45 or 50 years old before they let you have the responsibility that you have at age 25.
Yeah, very true.
It's a great training place and a great experience, and you serve your nation. Yeah. I'd make a great recruiter.
Yeah, hey, listen, there's still time. You've got 3 boards when I get on another one. Well, man, thank you so much for sitting down with me. Before we finish up, so tell people one more time, where can they go to donate to the cause?
www.usslcs102.gov
All right, great. Well, let's try and get that ship all the way to Philadelphia. And what time? October 9th? Is that when it needs to be there?
The ship parade is October 9th.
Okay, so the 8th would be best.
I'm starting to run out of runway because it takes time to take a ship from California down to Panama, through the Panama Canal, across the Gulf of America
Yeah.
to Florida, and then from Florida up to New Jersey
Well,
and the Delaware River.
one last question. Why is it the only ship left? Because you said some of them were sunk. What happened? Did they just decommission and repurpose
Well,
the
I
others?
can tell you they were built for not long life.
Okay.
They
Okay.
were essentially built out of 1/4-inch steel with the mission of winning the war. And so what happened is when Japan surrendered in September, those ships wound up, almost all of them, helping support the occupation of Japan for several years.
Okay.
Then they came back and were put in mothballs. And when Korea happened, some were taken out of mothballs and sent to the Pacific. After that, they put them in mothballs in Oregon and in Florida. And we started lending them to allied nations like Greece and Turkey and Japan and Thailand and Vietnam. And they used them as, sort of Coast Guard patrol craft because they had a lot of firepower. And particularly the reason that this one was left is Thailand used it in counter-drug operations up until 2007.
Oh, all right.
And, they kept putting new engines in and new radars. And but eventually, they got used up. And my father had command of one, LCS-18. And eventually the one he had was used for target practice.
All right.
They towed it out, 30 miles off the Atlantic coast and sent a destroyer out and said, go shoot the hell out of it and have your gunner's mates learn how to shoot things.
All right.
So almost all of them were either scrapped. A couple of them were actually sold to, they took the guns off them and sold to fishing enterprises, but all the guns were removed and they were just, they had 8 diesel engines in them, 4 on one side and 4 on the other. And so they were 160 feet long and about 24 feet wide. And so some were, and then of course they get old and eventually they sell them to a scrap dealer and you shave with them a couple of years later.
All right. Neat. Well,
Scrap steel turned into either a car or a razor blade.
I love the repurposing. Good deal. Well, then please help get ship
But a
back
bunch
to-
of them were, 26 were sunk or damaged beyond repair out of 130. That left 100 in 1945, 46 really, the end of 45. And they were used for a lot of purposes. And when they were used up, they got thrown away or recycled.
No, good to know. Well,
I don't know how many were used as target practice, but I know my dad's hull, they shot it to pieces and sank it.
It's going to be kind of fun. I've shot an old refrigerator before. It was entertaining. It was in the middle of the desert. I didn't hate it. Well, please help go donate. And if you like this, share it, send it along, and get anybody involved that you can.
There's also a
Appreciate it.
GoFundMe page, but you'd have to look up LCS 102. It's not easy to find. I think it probably is easy. There's a GoFundMe page, but unless I get wide press coverage, but it's an easy way to donate.
Well, I'll get a link in there. That way that everybody
Yeah,
can
put a
find that.
link
We'll,
in.
we'll
That'd
find a
be good.
GoFundMe
Yeah,
page for
put-
you. Cool. Well, thank you. Thanks for teaching me everything you did, man. And hope everybody enjoyed.
I enjoyed it.
Thanks, sir. As did I. As did I.
When you cut it off, I want to say something.
Yeah, of course, of course.